Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Arizona Senate race between Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly and Republican challenger Blake Masters. Now with about 2 months to go, the Republicans are not exactly in the best position in the state of Arizona, which was a state that Joe Biden only won by 0.3%. In fact, if we take a look at the polls, which we will in just a second, Mark Kelly has a pretty sizable lead, again, in a state that should be purple, if not a red state, in the 2022 midterm environment. So we'll take a look at why that's exactly the case, as well as Arizona's electoral history over the past couple of years, to kind of analyze why the Democrats are doing so well here in Arizona and whether or not that's likely to stay true up until the midterms in about 2 months. But before we get to that, please consider subscribing down below if you're new and liking this video if you enjoy. So anyway, looking ahead at 2022 for the Senate race here in Arizona, Mark Kelly currently is leading in the polls by a larger average than he did back in 2020. And that's not super surprising given the fact that he is an incumbent. Not many people know who Blake Masters is yet, at least in the general Arizona electorate. And if they do, it's probably negative things since Mark Kelly basically dominates the airwaves in the state of Arizona. But nonetheless, Mark Kelly is up by an average of 6 to 7.8%, nearly 8 points so far in, again, what's supposed to be a Republican-leaning midterm. Now, of course, some of these early polls aren't exactly the most reliable. Of course, you have some polls from Democratic firms that have Mark Kelly up by 11 points or so, but even the right-leaning polls still have Blake Masters down by about 4 points, by about 7. So really, we don't have any good polling out of Arizona yet. But as of right now, Mark Kelly is doing a lot better than Blake Masters. And I think there's several reasons why this is the case. Of course, Mark Kelly is very good at portraying himself as a moderate to Arizona voters. There's a reason why back in 2020, despite Donald Trump losing the state by just 0.3%, Martha McSally, the incumbent Republican senator, lost by about 2.4% against Mark Kelly. Simply, she didn't really run a great campaign for the state of Arizona. She was a very unpopular incumbent, and ultimately, Mark Kelly ran a good campaign in places where it mattered, like the suburbs around Phoenix and Maricopa County, Pima County, these other huge population centers where he was able to drive up his margins. Now, what's really interesting about the 2022 polling, to me anyway, is that you have various polls that have the Republican Senate nominees doing very poor in a lot of these key states, places like Arizona, Pennsylvania, up until recently even Georgia, some polls in Wisconsin. Yet the Republican House candidates are doing a lot better. In fact, the generic ballot in a lot of these key swing states is going towards the Republicans. There was one that had Republicans winning the generic ballot by 7 in Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case. I doubt it. But there's a lot of polls where there seems to be a big discrepancy between the Senate candidates and the House candidates. Down ballot House candidates for the GOP are performing a lot better than their top of the ticket in the Senate races. Now, it is pretty interesting. Some attribute that to candidate quality. Others attribute it to the fact that more people know their senators. Their statewide figures are much more well known than their member of the House. But nonetheless, it doesn't bode well for the Republicans that they're doing so poorly in these crucial races, because Republicans originally were projected to win not just the House, but also win the Senate back. And as of right now, the Senate is looking more and more like a toss-up, and the House still seems to be a foregone conclusion for the GOP as of now. But taking a look back at 2020 again to the Senate election here, Martha McSally lost by the exact same margin she lost by back in 2018. Now, I don't know whose good idea it was to nominate Martha McSally again for this open Senate seat since she lost by 2.4%. But I think the rationale behind Doug Ducey's decision was that 2018 was a poor year for Republicans, generally speaking, and that she would have a better chance as an incumbent in 2020, provided Donald Trump was reelected. But even if Trump narrowly did win the state of Arizona, it's very unlikely that he would have carried Martha McSally with him. She underperformed him in the raw percentage by about 0.5%. Mark Kelly overperformed President Biden by over 2 percentage points. So even if Trump was to narrowly win the state of Arizona, I doubt this Senate race would have gone his way. Again, Martha McSally was a very poor choice for the GOP. I think she was a very unlikable candidate to run for Senate. A lot of her attacks on Mark Kelly during the debates really fell flat with the general electorate in Arizona, and ultimately Arizona is a state that's been trending more and more towards the Democrats. Now, it's a specific kind of Democrat. It's more of the generic run-of-the-mill Democrat rather than the progressive Democrats, which tend to do very poorly in the state of Arizona. You need look no further than the governor's race that was on the exact same ballot as the Senate race, in which David Garcia, who was a progressive Bernie Sanders-style Democrat, lost to Doug Ducey by 14.2%. Again, in a year that was massively favorable to the Democratic Party. Again, he was losing to Doug Ducey in Maricopa County by Romney margins in a really poor year for Democrats. So it goes to show you that the Arizona electorate is somewhat elastic. There is some split ticket voting that still happens in Arizona. And what's so interesting about this Senate race as opposed to the governor's race is it seems like Kari Lake, the Republicans' nominee for governor, is doing a lot better than Blake Masters. Now, if we take a look at fundraising, Mark Kelly has a gigantic advantage. Blake Masters early on in the primaries was really pushed to the forefront by billionaire Peter Thiel, who also backed J.D. Vance. Now, both of these candidates are doing pretty poorly in their general elections. J.D. Vance obviously running in a much redder state than Arizona. He's probably still going to win, even if he doesn't really get the fundraising there, just because Ohio is such a red state now. But in the terms of Arizona, Blake Masters is in a lot of trouble, only able to raise about $4 million, which is such a small amount in a year that Republicans are expected to do very well. And we're actually going to do another video on this tomorrow covering the lack in fundraising that the GOP is currently suffering from, because the Democrats are outraising Republicans in a lot of these Senate races, and a lot of these seats Republicans need to flip. They need to flip Arizona if they're going to control the Senate. They need to flip Nevada, and they need to flip Georgia, most likely, and they need to hold on to Pennsylvania. So many things have to go in the GOP's favor that at this point in time, it doesn't exactly look that optimistic for them, especially given the fact that they're unable to raise money. Blake Masters is simply unable to raise money on his own. He needs somebody like Donald Trump or Peter Thiel to come to his rescue if he's going to end up winning this race in November. Mark Kelly has absolutely no problem. The Democrats have been consistently outraising the Republicans on the Senate front since at least June. And, you know, part of that has to do with Democratic enthusiasm with Dobbs. But it also has to do with the fact that Republicans have been lagging in the generic ballot. Again, probably due to the same reason. A lot of Democratic donors aren't so afraid to donate to these Democratic candidates, something they wouldn't have done about 6 to 8 months ago when it looked very bad for the Democrats in both the Senate and the House races. But ultimately, this race is going to come down to turnout, obviously, and fundraising. Of course, Mark Kelly himself has a huge advantage, being the incumbent senator from Arizona, being able to outperform the top of the ticket Joe Biden by about 2 points or so. It goes to show you his electoral viability in a year that's not so favorable to the Democrats, because Joe Biden is very unpopular in the state of Arizona, yet Mark Kelly consistently is still viewed very favorably by the general public. So it seems that in this cycle, more than previous ones, at least according to the polls we have now, more and more voters are differentiating between their Democratic senator and the Democrat in the White House. And again, a lot of Biden's disapproval rating, or a big chunk of it, is disaffected left-wing voters in the Democratic Party who don't think Joe Biden has done enough to advance certain parts of his agenda. When you account for that, Joe Biden's probably only underwater by single digits nationwide. He has a lot of independents against him. Of course, he has basically all of the Republicans. But the vast majority of the Democrats will come home to him in the coming weeks. And you'll start to see that Joe Biden's approval rating will likely increase as we get closer to the midterms, as you have more of this rally around the flag approach with Democrats coalescing around Biden to try and give him a bump ahead of the midterm elections. But between Masters and Kelly, I think there's a number of things at play here. Obviously, if Mark Kelly can continue his moderate image among the Arizona voters, I think he'll probably end up winning if that's the case. Obviously, if Blake Masters wants to win this race in November, he needs to do something to chip away at Mark Kelly's so-called moderate image, highlight certain policy areas where he is 100% in line with Joe Biden, and of course highlight his voting record, which is 100% behind Joe Biden. So really, this race is one of the toss-ups, and we'll talk about the other 3 toss-ups in future videos throughout the rest of the week and probably into next week as well. I'm not doing an actual prediction in this video, more so just analyzing what's going on in the race right now. Abortion is an issue that Mark Kelly's been leaning into very heavily this campaign. A lot of other incumbent Democratic senators have done that as well, such as Catherine Cortez Masto. You even have Raphael Warnock running ads in Georgia. Fetterman, to a lesser extent, he's been more focused on economic issues and attacking his opponent. But, you know, in these 3 states especially, abortion has been a huge issue. And Blake Masters has been cleaning up his image on abortion, to say the least. He removed some aspects of his website that indicated that he was 100% pro-life. And he actually released an ad that tried to paint Mark Kelly as more of an extremist on abortion. So abortion is an issue that I think ultimately Republicans will lose on if it's the only thing they fixate on, because just in the general public alone, their positions are very unpopular. I think the only way Republicans win on the abortion argument is to argue that the Democrats are more extreme from their point of view. Now, that's very unlikely to land, I think, in a lot of states, especially since Dobbs basically overturned Roe v. Wade, and of course, a lot of Republicans now are really not talking about abortion, or at least trying to avoid it because they know it's a huge liability. I think in a world where Roe v. Wade was still the law of the land, I think Republicans would be in a slightly stronger position. There is somewhat of a polling dip that they have in the summertime, but I don't think you'd see Democrats weaponizing abortion as effectively as they are able to now, because Republicans in some really red states like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Oklahoma, have done outright bans, and in some cases with no exception. So when you run ads like that in these various moderate suburbs, you know, places in Arizona around Phoenix that were previously precincts that Romney probably won by like 20 points or more, you know, all of these places trending to the left, that's not going to stop with that sort of attack line. So while issues like the economy are incredibly important to a lot of people, abortion is enough to weaponize a certain segment of the electorate to come out strongly against whoever the Republican nominee is. So ultimately, again, I think this race as of right now is still a toss-up. At this point in time, if the election were held today, I would say that Mark Kelly would probably end up winning by about a point or so, given the fact that he has so far done just a better job of presenting his message to Arizona voters. Blake Masters just simply doesn't have the money to do that. He hasn't been able to run a lot of ads in the state. Mark Kelly has dominated the airwaves, and I think that sort of commanding control of the narrative would be enough to put Mark Kelly over the top. Anyway, that's it for today's video. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.